All right, guys, how's it going? Another episode here with Final Form Studios podcast. My name is Steve Wilcox, the host, and our guest today is Peter. Want to go ahead and introduce yourself there, Peter?
Yeah, my name is Peter Hyoguchi, and I am a director, writer, producer, visual effects supervisor, and then in the last 4 years, a virtual production supervisor.
Okay. And so you guys, yeah, you've been doing this for a little while now. So how do you feel like the difference between kind of doing kind of like virtual production with like Unreal and then also kind of like your standard productions, not using kind of like the CG stuff? How do you find that like workflow, like the difference?
It's just like very, very different. Um, yeah, I was introduced to the Unreal Engine about 4 years ago, and I was hired on a sci-fi movie called Gods of Mars, which is there. And this was a feature film that was in development at a studio, like a low budget studio, and they wanted to make a low budget sci-fi movie. And I had done a lot of sci-fi at a low budget sci-fi for the Sci-Fi Channel. I had done a couple movies for the Sci-Fi Channel, and so that I got referred to. And um, my initial idea was I wanted to kind of go old school with less CGI and more miniatures, like they did back in the day, the sort of industrial light and magic heyday, where they would make actual physical models. And I just really like that tactile nature of physical models. And so I had pitched the studio on this idea of making a bunch of miniatures for Gods of Mars. So we would make Mars and all the spaceships physical miniatures. And I'm friends with Fawn Davis, who has a studio in LA, but his background is a miniature creator at Industrial Light and Magic. So he made miniatures for Star Wars episodes one, 2, and 3, as well as like Men in Black and all kinds of other films. And so he's one of the few visual effects artists that are working in physical, miniatures. It's just kind of almost like a lost art form. So we started developing this idea of making the movie that way, and then shooting on a green screen, and then compositing the actors in front of these miniature environments. So that was the sort of early idea. And then my business partner and co-producer Joan Webb, she had this idea of um, using the Unreal Engine, and I'd heard about the Unreal Engine for video games, and I play video games, so I thought, well, that kind of looks like crap, and I'm not really all that interested in using that. But she said, look, there's a demo, a few miles away from your house. You should go check it out. And so I went over there, and they had a sound stage with an LED wall. And this is before The Mandalorian, so there was nobody really knew about this at the time. I had never heard of it. And so I saw the Unreal Engine being projected on this wall, and they had a camera with a little sensor on it. And it looked very strange. The camera would move, and the environment on the wall would move in real time, and it would like warp and change. If you looked at the actual studio itself, it looked very kind of made you kind of feel sick.
Wow.
Then in the monitor, I could see that there was parallax happening, and it was like a big magic trick that was really fascinating to me. So the demo, there was maybe 50 people there, and they allowed me to actually hold the camera and physically move it around. And my dad was visiting me from Japan, and so I said, Dad, stand right there. My dad's here now, actually, but this was 4 years ago. Anyway, we had to put my dad in the middle of the sound stage. Excuse me. And I moved the camera around, and the background, they had created kind of like a Blade Runner city at nighttime kind of thing, flying cars and neon and everything. Very much a Blade Runner type city of the future. And the whole trick of this is you're getting it in camera. And man, it really looked incredible. And it's just beautiful. I really did feel like we were in another, like we were transported into this future world in real time. So it wasn't a green screen. He was really there. And I thought, this is maybe something, maybe we could make a whole movie like this. And so then I asked the guys, those guys who were doing that, their company is called AR Wall. And I said, the parallax looks really real, and it could save a lot of money by not doing, all of the post-production of replacing a green screen can be very time consuming. It doesn't work all the time very well. I mean, people think it's like a switch, you just turn it on and off and it works great, and it just doesn't. And even high-end movies, there's all kinds of mistakes that happen, and painstakingly removing hairs, and it can be like a year of post-production if you shoot a movie that's mostly on green screen, and it's very expensive. You have to have a whole army of people, usually in like Mexico or India or something like that, where the labor is cheaper, but it's still, you got to hire hundreds of guys, and it takes a long time. So to do it in real time is really a big game changer. The problem is that it still looked like a video game during that time. I mean, it's still, if you kept it out of focus, you could kind of get away with it. But if you really looked closely at it, it still looked like a video game. And the reason why is I think when you make something in Unreal, at the time anyway, even in making something in regular CGI like Maya or something like that, it can look really fake because it's perfect. The lines are perfect. And to make things look more real, they need to be a little imperfect. And so scanning things is a great solution. And at the time, they had just started this company called Quixel, and they were scanning rocks and trees and nature. And by scanning reality and then bringing that into the Unreal Engine, there was a way of making things look more real, more organic. And so I thought, maybe we can just scan miniatures, and we can make the miniatures the way I originally wanted. And then we can do like a laser scan, and then like the way that Quixel's doing their nature scans. And then we can have our spaceships look more real, and we can maybe do that, create that process. No one had done that at that point. And turns out Unreal or Epic has a mega grant. It's called the Epic Mega Grant.
Were you one of the lucky recipients of the Epic Mega Grants?
Yeah, we got 2 mega grants, and and so we were able to utilize that free money basically to develop a workflow. And Epic, their Unreal Engine is free, and so if you need technical support, there really isn't any there for you, because if you pay for a product like Maya, the license is, I don't know, like 10,000 a year or something like that, or maybe it's less now, but it used to be very expensive. It used to be like 20,000 a year. But if you had a problem with it, there would be somebody there to help you 24/7, and you pay for that. You're paying for that service. Unreal Engine is free. But if you have a problem, you're sort of shit out of luck. You got to figure it out yourself. So they give out these mega grants as a way of opening up the world so that they can figure out these problems, these issues. So we were, the goal was we wanted to use the Unreal Engine to make photoreal CGI effects in a film, and had never been done up to that point. And so we got an Epic Mega Grant, and just around that time, the Mandalorian came out, and they were saying, hey, we're using the Unreal Engine and we're using the LED wall. And so it was sort of like, wow, maybe this is something, viable. And they were very secretive about how they were doing their process. They had some mini documentaries online about it, but they were overall very secretive.
Mm.
So we had to figure out our own methodology. And then, one of the things that our mega grant was for was utilizing, making miniatures, having Hollywood quality miniatures from the guy who did Star Wars, and then scanning them and putting them in the Unreal Engine. No one had done that up to that point. So we were creating this whole workflow in order to make the film. Now, we ended up never making the film, and the financing fell through on the project. But in the process, it was a little it's heartbreaking when projects fall through, but they fall through all the time.
Mm.
And what we were able to do was we were able to make a chunk of the movie, and we were able to make a bunch of making of, like, how-to videos that we wanted to do sort of the opposite of Mandalorian, which is just let everyone know exactly how we were doing our thing,
Yeah.
so that the people could, everyone should be able to do it. It's tremendously cheaper. I mean, it's like so much cheaper to do, and faster, much faster. And so we made a bunch of mini documentaries. You can go online and you can look up Creating a Universe, The Making of Gods of Mars. I think that's what it's called. Anyway, if you go to Roninfilm, RONINFILM.com, all these VFX breakdowns and all the stuff that we did on Gods of Mars is there. We did many of these mini documentaries on how we made the film, and what our process was. And then we ended up, that project sort of fizzled out. The studio lost all of its money and the financing. And so we had kind of a period of like, oh, what do we do now? And then immediately, it was a very short window of time before, like, the financing fell through, when I got hired by a studio in Florida that had built an LED wall, but they didn't really know how to use it. And they didn't have anyone with experience either making the digital environments or shooting on them. And so they hired me. I ended up moving. We ended up hiring my whole team, and we all moved to Florida. And we did 8 commercials, back to back. And I did a short film and a bunch of commercials, even a Super Bowl commercial. So it wasn't last year's Super Bowl, it was the Super Bowl before. And it did several commercials, including a Super Bowl commercial for this energy company, this like solar energy company. And that was great experience. I got to be on an LED wall that was twice the resolution of the Mandalorians. So it was like the latest and the greatest. And just to have practice working on that. And then around this time, I had shelved a movie that I had written and produced that was sort of half done. And that movie is called The Tarot. And that's a film that I was shooting sort of like in my off hours whenever I could over the course of, took us about 6 years to make this movie. And there was many scenes that took place in locations that I could not afford to shoot in. And so what I did was, while I still had my actors and everything, I went ahead and just shot the scenes with green screen, with sort of lighting that I would imagine, without sort of imagining, okay, well, maybe it would look like this, So we shot a bunch, it was over 100 shots that we did with green screen. And then I was like, well, maybe, hopefully I'll be able to raise enough money to do the VFX to make those environments happen so that I could finish the film. And so I had was never able to raise actual financing for that movie. So I was just sort of doing it in my spare time, and everyone was volunteering. And then, but the process of making Gods of Mars and all these commercials, I realized like I could actually go ahead and do the visual effects for the movie. And so we ended up going ahead and very affordably being able to make all the environments in Unreal Engine for the Tarot. And miraculously, I was able to finish it. And I just finished it a couple of weeks ago.
Congratulations.
And it's because I would have, thank you, and I would have never been able to accomplish it. Either I had to have raised $1 million, or I was able to just do with two artists these 100 shots,
Yeah.
and they're just be, without the Unreal Engine, I just would have never been able to afford to. It's there, to give you an idea of, like, I did a television pilot 10 years ago using the sort of traditional VFX pipeline. And it took me 200 visual effects artists for a year to do one shot. And this was a very complicated shot. And it was, it's like a 3 minute long shot, all CG with a gigantic future world, and
Hmm.
very much like Blade Runner, actually. And very, very difficult. And I was able to do a similar shot for Gods of Mars. Instead of 200 artists, two artists
Hmm.
over a weekend instead of a year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous how quick, how fast, how efficient, how
Yeah.
effective the Unreal Engine is, and it's free. It's
Yeah.
really a huge, huge game changer, and I think people are starting to figure out, like, what a magnificent change. It's just that VFX artists are used to working with a certain pipeline,
Hmm.
and the Unreal Engine is a very radically different pipeline. And so to sort of, a lot of guys are like working on Marvel movies back to back or Star Wars movies back to back, and they don't have the time to stop. Not just the VFX artists, but like the producers, the directors, everyone involved, like, stop and figure out the new pipeline, because Unreal Engine doesn't work the same way as any other visual effects software. So you really do have to sort of stop what you're doing and kind of retrain yourself. And it took us, years to, it took us about a year and a half to really understand how to work with it and how to achieve the kind of photoreal visual effects shots in animation that are comparable to what people are used to seeing in a Marvel movie.
Yeah, like for myself, I never really was really dove into Maya. I got like a little bit of like Blender experience, very, very minimal. But yeah, I'm not really I don't actually do myself like the traditional workflows of VFX. I kind of came into it at a very interesting period where I was working as like in nightclubs at the time doing like recap videos for DJs, and then Corona had happened. And then basically the DJs just had nothing to do at the time. So I started doing virtual concerts using Unreal Engine here in Japan. So yeah, like one of the pioneers of
Wow.
doing the virtual concerts here. And then there was a VFX company that was working with one of the national broadcast companies here in Japan for NHK. And I was like very lucky, and I ended up renting a Rococo suit from this company. And then for a week, and I tried it out. I was doing some real time character.
Motion capture?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was using the like one of the first to learn like the Rococo to iClone to Unreal. I was like working with that pipeline.
Cool.
So I showed the company this,
Nice.
like, hey, in real time, I'm able to do this VFX stuff, and they were pretty impressed with that. So I was talking to them about, LED virtual production, it like just kind of come out with like The Mandalorian. And then, so yeah, I started doing the LED virtual production as a LED a virtual production supervisor here in Japan for like
Cool.
the Tiger drama stuff. So I got really lucky. It was like I had like my own studio to kind of play with. It was just like demo
That's
after demo.
awesome.
So yeah, I kind of
That's
snuck in the back
great.
door. Like I'd always wanted like the whole
That's
reason
great.
for me.
Yeah, we both had a similar kind of experience, like right when it was all happening.
Yeah, so it just like and like in LA, I imagine there was a lot of people that, were kind of doing it at the time. Like there was like it's still there were people doing it, but in Japan, just like no one, like everyone had like kind of heard of Unreal, but in Japan here it's mostly Unity based, so there's not a lot of people
Oh,
using
wow.
all the time. So
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah, I just had to figure out everything kind of like myself, and I hired some like consultants from New York to kind of help me like with that whole process. So yeah, I
Cool.
did a lot of stuff with like the LED virtual production, and yeah, it was really amazing for the first time, having like we had like a 20 meter by 5 meter LED wall, and then we had like full set design. We had um,
Wow.
the
That's
traditional
amazing.
Japanese costumes. We had temples and
Wow.
boats built.
Oh my
Yeah,
God, that's great. Oh,
yeah,
I can't wait to check that out.
yeah. So
That's
that
so
was
cool.
so I got really lucky, but yeah, there was a lot of times where, I was like pretty overwhelmed. I was like, wow, I was the only guy on set. Like there was myself and then we had one other level designer. Um and so it was just me and like one other guy, but I was basically in charge of doing all of the VFX, all the camera tracking, and if anything
Wow.
went wrong, it was just kind of on me to fix it. And there were a few times
Yeah.
where, yeah, there was a few times where I was just like, you guys, I don't know when this is gonna get up and running. So, and it was a very, very different workflow because like in Japan, things like go chop, chop, chop. It's a very
Right.
very fast-paced workflow, and they're not used to when things kind of delay or kind of like they're like, well, this is a new technology. We're not really too sure what's going on. So, Steve, hopefully you can get this working pretty soon. So, yeah, so it was
What camera tracking system are you working with?
so at the time, like when I first started doing the demos, I was actually just working with an old I started just in like a small Japanese apartment and just like kind of doing like the demos and tests. And then I would show those
Hmm.
demos and tests to a few companies. And then from there, I got invited to do small demos on LED, like on a very small, like 5 meter by 5 meter studio.
Yeah.
And then at the time, I was just using a Vive, like the old
Okay. The Vibe
Vive,
tracker.
yeah, the Vive tracker. So I was just using
Yeah.
Vive. And then we needed to kind of come up with a better solution for Vive because Vive would kind of go in and out sometimes. And the
Mm.
tracking at the time just to me wasn't reliable. So then I kind of switched over to using Moses. But then uh,
Moses is great. That's what I
yeah,
use.
Moses was phenomenal. But then there
A
were a few
great company and they're real supportive.
yeah, like I felt like when I made the switch from Vive to Mars, it was just like I would set up the calibration and do everything, and then I would forget about it. Like it was just like, oh, it's
Hmm.
set up. Like I'm not thinking about it. There's other things that, as
Hmm.
virtual production supervisor, you have to like kind of like you don't want to worry about tracking. So, but then there were actually a few times where we had like temples built like wooden temples, and then we had to actually go inside, and then you couldn't see the tracking sensors on the ceiling. So yeah, I built a hybrid system where for the most part it would use the Moses, but then I would switch it over quickly if I had to using the Vive. So and then since then I've teamed up. I'm the official like reseller for the Vive Mars here in Asia Pacific. So been working with those guys
Cool.
quite a bit, and yeah, I think the Mars, like the Vive system, is like a pretty good system to kind of for indie filmmakers with a little bit more budget
Hmm.
because you can always go for like the Mars, the traditional the headsets, but
Hmm.
the Mars is a nice little upgrade. So yeah, it is nice.
How long have
So
you been in Japan for?
I've been in Japan now for 5 years. Yeah, so 5 years, and
Oh,
then
wow. So you have a
yeah,
visa and everything?
yeah, so I have a visa, and then yeah, so I also have I have a company. My company is based out of Hong Kong, and then we're just opening up the new one here in Japan. So hopefully that'll be all the paperwork and everything that'll be knocked out in the next couple of weeks. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I would love to come by your studio
yeah. Would
and
love to have you and just give
see
you a
what
tour.
you guys are doing. That Yeah, I mean, I go to Japan every couple of years. So and I stay with my dad, he's in Hachioji,
Mm,
which is the KO line. It's about half an hour away from like Shinjuku
yeah,
and Shibuya.
mm, yeah, yeah. If you're
Yeah,
ever
used to live there.
Yeah, it's a good, definitely very nice place. So, yeah, I'm actually hoping to come to LA maybe June or July for like a little trip. So I want to start to try to get a little bit more business happening between LA and
Yeah,
Japan.
let me know if I'm not. I go to LA all the time. I live in right outside of Austin, Texas,
Okay, okay.
and but I go to LA. I'll be there next week, and I go there quite a bit. Um, and But we'll have to coordinate because If I'm when you're in LA, if I'm there, then we'll meet. If not, then my business partner Joan, she is really tied into the virtual production world in LA. Like she knows all the stages, she knows all the people who are in the world of virtual production in LA, and she could introduce you to everybody there.
Yeah, I love to love to always happy to talk to and link up with people like doing film and virtual production. So it's really exciting because I feel that more and more people are like kind of getting into it. And I feel like when I started, I didn't know anyone. Like it was kind of a good joke between like the circle of friends I had. They're like, Steve, you're an audience of one. Like you're only doing this for
Right.
yourself. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. So now it's really
That's
fun
how
to
that's how I was feeling for so long, and starting to catch on. It's still not as much, it's not as mature as I would hope it to be. It's taking a long time, but I think it's the education that has to really improve. People need to learn how it all works. And
yeah.
then, when a project is greenlit, it's really, the director is really the person who drives the technique. So if the director is, used to doing a certain type of production where it's like, I want all physical sets, or I want to be on a soundstage, a green screen soundstage, or I want to do it on location, or whatever that combination is. It's usually the director and his team, right? So it's the producer, the director, the DP, the VFX supervisor, and it's like usually those people are all like part of a tribe, and they will go from one project to the next,
Hmm.
and together they figure out the technique, and then whatever technique that is for whatever script that gets greenlit is then they do a budget breakdown based on the techniques that they're used to. And
Yeah.
so, for virtual production to happen on a movie, it has to happen really early on, because it can change, it changes the entire budget and the
Yeah.
schedule. Everything's different. You can't just go halfway through pre-production, oh, let's just do virtual production now. It's like, no, it
Yeah.
has to be completely designed from the very beginning. And if they're not familiar with how to do it, or they are, but they're afraid, a lot of people are afraid of it because they haven't done it. And
Hmm.
because they haven't done it, so it's like this chicken or egg thing. And so the more people that experiment with it, the more the industry is going to grow.
Hmm.
But the VFX world is afraid of it because it threatens. It actually. I was on a panel with some of the guys over who work on the Mandalorian,
Hmm.
some of the stagecraft people, and won't mention names, but they said to me to stop saying it's cheaper, because they were worried that, word would get out, and that it would threaten the visual effects community, because you can do it for like millions of dollars cheaper.
Hmm.
And they were like, just stop telling people that. And I'm like, well, it's just it's the truth, like we might as well just embrace it, and but yeah, it does threaten a lot of people. It threatens jobs. And but I feel like if you could make a movie that looks like $100 million for $20 million, then you
Yeah.
could make a couple, you make a few $20 million movies, instead of like gambling everything on a $100 million movie. Why don't you? Most movies don't make money. Most movies lose money. So why don't
Yeah.
you do more movies on a smaller budget, and then you have more chance for financial success.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way in Hollywood. It's more like, there are people who make these tentpole movies, and they're used to getting a certain amount of money, and they're used to breaking down the scripts in a certain way. Also, their buddies over at the major VFX houses, they know, they work with these people. They know they can deliver. It might cost much more than virtual production, but they don't really care, because they just know that this is they can deliver, and they won't lose their jobs. So who
Yeah.
cares, right?
Hmm.
Sorry, that's my rice cooker.
That's okay.
Um, uh, so so yeah, it is a challenge to get people to work on using virtual production. A lot of the major Hollywood productions, whether it's television or feature films, that are starting to embrace virtual production, the line producers and the producers, the people who are the finance people, they're so worried about, like being in a situation that you talked about where you're on set and something breaks or doesn't work, and then you've got to like everyone's sitting around while you're trying to figure out, how to fix it or how to make it work or whatever. But the so what they'll do is they'll hire a like uh, double the amount of people. So it's like in case the virtual production doesn't work, they'll go ahead and do it. They'll budget in twice as much just
Yeah.
in case the virtual production part doesn't work. They'll do it in the traditional way.
Yeah.
So when you talk to them, people in the business about virtual production saving money, they're like, "Oh no, it's actually twice as much." It's like, well, because you're covering your ass, you're
Yeah.
not really trusting and leaning into virtual production.
Mhm.
Like for instance, I was started to do these commercials using the LED wall and shooting on the volume, and I would schedule these commercial shoots like very similar to how long I would need to cover a scene, per page,
Yeah.
in a regular traditional shoot. And what I would find is that day after day, I would actually be finished hours
Mm.
earlier, like wrapping 3-4 hours earlier than I had scheduled,
Wow.
and then not being able to do anything because like certain actors weren't even coming on to the next day, right? Or it was like, well, we literally go home at 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
I'd never experienced that. I've been making movies since I was a kid, and I've literally
Go
been
home
making
early.
movies for 40 years. I mean, I look young, but I've been making movies for 40 years. And every single shoot I've ever done, I've gone over. I have gone over schedule, and that's normal for most filmmakers. You go over schedule and you don't get all the shots that you want. You have to kind of throughout the day make little concessions and go, well, there's not enough time for this dolly shot, or there's not enough time to get this coverage. And so you're just constantly kind of like, you make your list of the things you absolutely need, and then you got your list of things like, oh, if we have time, then we'll do X, Y, and Z, and many of those shots you just never get. Well, I was able to get everything I wanted and more and experiment, and then also be done hours early.
Yeah, that's
That
amazing.
just never happens. And it's because I don't have to do a company move. The company move is everything.
Mhm.
Even if it's just moving to going and flipping around and doing coverage from the other angle, like even not moving your physical location, but just moving your gear and your people and everything. I mean, it's a lot faster with virtual production. We shot this one short film where it was like the opening scene is in a casino, and to shoot in a casino would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. You got to like shut it down. The actors, the people who would be gambling on those like machines and tables and stuff are not doing anything but acting. So you have to accommodate for the losses of the casino, and then you got to move. I had a techno jib, so like moving a techno jib is like, it's a huge thing. You have to disassemble it. You have to put it into a van. It takes a couple guys, at least 2 guys, to do it. And you drive it to the casino. Then you undo it. This is the day before. Then you take it out. You reassemble it. You got to schlep it from the parking structure to the casino. Like all this stuff that to be able to do like this really cool shot where we're like gliding over the poker table and then up over his cards and everything, and to be able to do that would just be so expensive. And I was able to do the whole scene in like 2 hours, and then we had a shot in a condominium that we were able to just pull out the poker table and then put in a kitchen island, and then we're in a whole nother. Took us 20 minutes to go from one location to the next, where it would take all day
Mm.
doing it traditionally. So I was able to do like 3-4 locations in a single day,
Yeah.
which
And I
is
think
like
that
time is money.
it is amazing. And I think that also not only while like for production, but pre-production, like you being able to use, and I don't know if like in your workflows, are you using Unreal Engine for previs also?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, most of what I do is pre-production. So it's like we do this whole previs where I put metahumans in the set, and
Mm.
I figure out what's going to be physical and what's going to be on the wall. And then I figure out my lighting and the camera move and the physical blocking of the actors all
Mm.
before I ever even end up on the volume. So I know exactly what I'm going to do when I get there. And I'm always like experimenting, on set too. But basically, the fundamental. So the other thing that really saves a lot of time is I figure out all my camera moves and my lighting before I finish building the environment. So what
Mm.
I'll do is I'll get an environment, like for instance, we had a scene for this short film, um, called, All In. And All In is you can watch it on Roninfilm.com. It's like a 10-minute short film, all with virtual environments, or all virtual production. And I had the scene, and it was in a kind of a like a an old, um, like 1950s apartment complex that's like kind of worn, kind of low income, with a chain link fence around it and a pool that didn't have any water in it, and I had this look that I wanted, and we were able to achieve it by just getting, we found the same kind of architectural structure in a motel that was like $20 on one of the marketplaces. It wasn't the Unreal Marketplace. It was like one of the other. There's like a dozen places you can buy sets and props and environments and things like
Yeah.
that. Real cheap. Some of them are free,
Mm.
but the basic geometry of this like 1950s motel was perfect. And so
Mm.
all we did was we took out the motel and took out some of the things that kind of gave it a motel feeling, and then made it look like an apartment complex.
Mm.
So then I was able to find a pool from another site, and we merged the pool with that, and we put palm trees. Supposed to be in Florida, so we added palm trees to it, and we had this fence, and then we had a physical fence that matched the fence in the digital world.
Mm.
And so it was a kind of a low poly, motel. So it wasn't photoreal, but it had the right, uh, the sort of what they call in architecture, like the bones were right, right. It was
Mm.
like the right look. So even though it was low polygon, it had the right geometry. I really liked it. So I figured out my camera angles. I had a crane shot, I had a reverse, and certain areas of the motel, I knew where I needed to look. Right. So I figured out my lighting, my camera angles, with a set that looked like a video game, really low poly.
Mm.
So then what we did was, then my team went in and we really made the details pop for where, we were looking.
Mm.
So not only did I know that from this angle and that angle and this angle, and there was like 4 different angles that I was never going to see. So we
Mm.
never bothered making them look good. Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I knew where my camera was going to be close to the set and where the set was going to be far away. So I knew that the things that were far away from the camera, I could keep those low poly too. So like trash cans and things that didn't need to be, and also made the scene lighter too. So we had like really low polygon things that were far away from the camera,
Yeah.
and really high polygon, high detail stuff that was close to the camera.
Mm.
And it saved. So if we were to make the entire environment look photoreal and high resolution, and then figure out my camera angles, I'd still be working on it today.
Yeah.
So it saves so much time by doing your previs and knowing what you need to do to what you need to make perfect, and what can just kind of either be ignored or just sort of like low resolution.
Yeah, I think for my students yesterday in my education class, I was teaching them. I often use like super grid as just a block out. So I was teaching them just like kind of like doing the very basic level designs, and kind of teaching them like going from very basic sketch, like a storyboard sketch, to kind of like blocking out the level, and then getting the camera animation, and then based on that render like where the camera is going to be. That's the areas that we want to focus on. And you don't want to, if the camera doesn't see it, we don't really have to build those
Right.
areas out. And yeah, I think for me too, like I was on I got hired to do like VFX for a Yamaha commercial, and it was a very, very high paced. We were using the Bolt arm, so all of the camera
Mhm.
movements were like they had to be kind of like pre planned, and so it had
Yeah.
like a seamless feel. So I rendered out the whole thing in Unreal as like a previs, and then so we knew all of the camera movements that were going to be happening.
Yeah.
So when I was on set, I wasn't really hired as like an on-set editor, but I was like, oh, you know what? I'll just bring the previs with us. So on set, I just had the previs running. So then the director's like, all right, we're doing this shot. So I had the clients behind me, and they were like so impressed. They were like, I just had the previs running. They're like, oh, this is the shot we're doing. And then this is what's before and this is what's after. So rather than just looking at a
Right.
2D storyboard, we had the previs just kind of running. And then as we're shooting, I would just kind of like use an Atomos recorder and I'd take that footage and then I'd plug it into the previs. So then as we're kind of
Hmm.
going through the commercial, we're just kind of like blocking,
Replacing.
we're just replacing the
Yeah.
previs. So that
Right.
we're
That's
like,
great.
oh,
That's the way to do it.
yeah. So then if we did have little changes, because on set,
You could see
there
how
are,
it's intercutting.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
we're like, oh,
That is absolutely the workflow
yeah,
that it's great. I mean, it's funny that, this is our first conversation we've ever had, but like,
yeah,
it's like everyone's sort of figuring out simultaneously, like just intuitively, like, oh, this is the best way of working
yeah, yeah,
with this new software, this new production method. We're really like pioneers in this. It's a totally new way of making movies. Um, I don't know if how much this is going to become the majority of the way of making movies is.
yeah.
Um, but um, but I'm so convinced that I've really dedicated my whole life to it. I mean, I don't want to make a movie, in a different way. I like being able to control
Yeah.
exactly how, and also just it's nice to be able to just go home at the end of the day.
Mm,
Do you know what I mean? To have like a
yeah.
life where you can really be creative. You can change. Like there'd be no, like for instance, I want that mountain to be moved 10 degrees to the left, and then we
Yeah.
just move the mountain. Or
Yeah.
I like that window, but I would like the window twice as big.
Mm,
Okay, let's just make it twice as big. That ability to really have the flexibility of animation, but in the real world is
yeah.
um, is like what everyone has always wanted.
Mm.
But every filmmaker has always wanted what we have now.
Yeah, and I think too, like this is like a whole other topic, but like using Unreal, like the like even block out renders plus AI. So some like the AI stuff that's coming out now is pretty, it's like text to video, but then if you have like rendered kind of like blockouts, the AI will kind of take
Mhm.
those blockouts and like it can just be simple primitive shapes. But if you had like say like a drone shot of Tokyo and you had like the blockout shapes, it would have like a photoreal drone shot that of like Tokyo. So AI like on top of what we're doing now is it's
Mhm.
I don't know, the possibilities are
The
really
whole
endless.
nother level.
Yeah,
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 I can't wait to play with it. I have not played with that. My team is kind of like experimenting with AI right now so that
yeah,
whenever it's applicable, we'll start to incorporate that, but I haven't done
yeah.
that yet. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I used it a lot for like the mid journey for like the concept art. I'm using a lot of that for just kind of like fleshing out ideas for character design and level design. And then because when
Mhm.
I'm using Unreal, and I always teach this, like anytime I'm doing any sort of level design, I'll have like a photoreal reference or have some sort of reference always kind of on my screen. So being able to use
Mhm.
Midjourney for some of these like just concept design,
Concept art, yeah.
yeah, concept art is really amazing. And then kind of pairing that up with ChatGPT for some of the script writing for like some like the revisions, the character like write-ups is like kind of like it's really good for kind of getting like a first kind of like a first rough idea.
First
And then
pass.
obviously you're
Yeah.
gonna have to kind of like go through and touch it up and put your own kind of ideas into it. But it's a really good for like I got some rough ideas, bullet points. All right, I'm gonna flesh this out, see what it kind of cooks up, and you're like, all right, I like this, and but I don't like that. So AI for
Yeah.
me is also kind of incorporating that workflow into the flow. So yeah, it's been
One
pretty
thing I
cool.
with it with AI that I've been playing with this concept of um, of doing um, deep fake
Hmm.
with Unreal. So one of the things that Unreal, in fact, all CGI has a problem with is like um, doing like for instance, if I wanted to have a shot where um, let's just say someone's driving in a car and I wanted to have the wheels actually touching the road. Like if I'm doing a car shot and it's like a medium shot, that's perfect for the LED because the reflections and all that stuff, right? But if I want to pull back and then do a crane shot that's flying like a drone all in one shot,
Yeah.
that I couldn't do that on the volume.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking is to so certain shots you want to accomplish, and it's like, well, the wall can't do that,
Yeah.
what you could do is you could have an Unreal Engine entire Unreal, so you're not filming anything; it's all in engine, and then you got your actor, um, like a double of your actor that's like a metahuman that looks
Yeah.
sort of like your actor,
Yeah.
and then you can do mocap, facial mocap, right?
Yeah.
And then so now you've got your actor driving the metahuman's facial and body features, and then what you can do is you can do a deep fake
Hmm.
so that the metahuman now looks identical to the real actor. And
Yeah.
so now your camera has the total freedom to be able to move any way it wants without the limitations of the wall.
Yeah.
And so there's just certain shots where I would like to be able to have full body or things that,
Yeah.
dynamic movement uh, that just goes beyond the wall, and um, or action sequences, things that are you don't want to put your actors in jeopardy if they're hanging off a
Yeah.
cliff or falling or doing something that could be very difficult or dangerous.
Yeah.
And then and that's something that AI can do really well. It's something that's not that expensive, and you can pull off really expensive, elaborate shots by doing that deep fake.
Yeah, actually, it was about a year and a half, a year and a half ago. I got asked to do like, oh, Steve, you can do Unreal Engine and virtual production. I was like, yeah, I can do that. Can you do deepfake? And I was like, well, no, but I will learn. So I had a very short period of time where there was one scene where we had one of our actresses. She didn't know how to surf, and it was for like there was quite a few shots for where we had to have stunt double do like a lot of the surfing, and then they were gonna kind of mask out the face and do that. So what we ended up doing for that one was we kind of did like a hybrid. So for
Mm-hmm.
the shots where like you could see both eyes and it was like nice in focus, deepfake works really well. But in this instance, we had a lot of shots where there was a lot of like waves and like a lot of splashing that kind of obscured the face. So we actually
Yeah.
ended up 3D scanning our actress, and so we kind of did like
Mm-hmm.
a hybrid of like we had some of our VFX team was like you using a nuke and compositing the face, and then they would give me that composite, and then just like doing the deep fake on top of that CG composite seemed to be the
Mm-hmm.
best because it like
Cool.
deep fake would kind of add a little bit more realism. But if the face is
Mm-hmm.
too far away and it's just like really, really out of focus, at the
Mm-hmm.
time, like there's
You don't
even
need it.
yeah, you don't need it. So and now there's even we just really struggled with like the resolution of the face, and like the deepfake AI was having a really hard time with that. But now there's really
Hmm.
there's upscale resolution AI that will kind of enhance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's amazing.
so
Yeah.
that I really wish I had that tool at the time, because like I was trying to go like frame by frame, just like it was like I think that's an eye. It was just like really blurry, like pixelated
Yeah.
face. And yeah, it didn't end like the really, really far shots, it didn't end up coming out at all. But when it was really close to the camera, I was like, wow, this is really impressive. And online on YouTube, there was like someone took a Tom Cruise took a metahuman and deep faked a Tom Cruise face, and I was like, looks photo real to me. So it's really incredible what you
That's
can do with
great.
that. So
Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
good solution, and it's very affordable.
yeah. So, yeah. So before I forget, I was gonna say we should, if it's okay with you, I was gonna play the trailer for Tarot. So
Sure. Yeah.
go ahead
Yeah.
and
So the trailer has a bunch of Unreal shots in there,
yeah.
and but then there's a bunch of shots that have no virtual production. So there's a real mix of virtual production and traditional production in the same trailer.
Hmm. Okay. So without further ado, we got.
Hey, you made
You
it.
made it. You have very lovely eyes. Are you a mix?
I am.
You should stop by my shop at some point and get a tarot read.
Hello.
Are you a mutt?
I feel like we've had this conversation before.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. Shuffle the deck and I'll get you that popsicle.
Oh. Yeah, I don't really want a tarot card read.
What'd you come here for then?
'Cause you invited me?
They're watching you. A woman in a green dress is going to offer you your dream job.
That's really specific. How does this card tell you that a woman in a green dress is gonna offer me my dream job?
Better be careful.
What?
I think I saw Elmer Fudd running around here earlier. It's rabbit season, you know.
Have you met Uncle Walter?
Lily, my granddaughter.
He took my brain, he turned it inside out and back outside in.
She looks like an angel, but she has a little devil inside.
Wanna draw with me?
Is that your church?
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming to the service of the light.
What does it say?
It says that we're soulmates and I'm going to have your baby.
And they eat babies. You need to have Jesus in your heart.
Have you seen anyone other than me?
Coming soon to a theater near you.
Cool.
Yeah. So did you want to talk a little bit about some of the scenes that you ended up using Unreal for this?
Sure. The there's two major locations where we used the Unreal Engine. One is the interior of the church. So I was unable to get a church.
Oh, sorry. I think that's my. Sorry about that. I think it was just after
Okay.
after your video had played. I think it was going on to the next one. Sorry.
So the interior of the church, I wanted to create a church that was very unique and was unable to find the physical location. So we ended up shooting all the church stuff with a green screen. And then we developed a technique where instead of compositing in After Effects or Nuke, what we did was we took the video, we removed the green and created an alpha channel, and then physically put it into 3D space in the Unreal Engine. So, like for instance, there's a shot of the preacher preaching. So he's like a video card that we then physically put behind a a podium, and then we made sure that the card was flush. This was something that I had never heard anyone doing before. So it was just like, hey, why don't we try this? And ended up working great. So we ended up putting that card flush with the camera, and then we matched the lighting with the lighting so we sort of back engineered it. So if we had a rim light around the actor and it was kind of like an amber rim light like this, we made sure that there was the sunlight was coming through the window this way. And so then we matched the color and the direction of the light. And then the other thing was nice is that if we put like smoke atmosphere, like a haze in the church, that would affect the card as well, the video card as well. So it was really in physical space. There was all kinds of stuff that you'd have to do in Nuke or After Effects that you didn't have to do. It was very, very quick to be able to, and to really see how the shot would work. It was amazing actually to move the camera and even though it was a 2D card, depending on how you moved it, it really did look like a 3D move, and it did not look like the card was a 2D card, especially by surrounding the 2D cards with 3D characters. Like for instance, I could put a metahuman. So like we did a one shot where we're behind the church, or we're at the end of the church looking forward, right? So the preacher's in the 3D environment in the Unreal Engine, but it's a card that was shot on video. He's standing looking towards the audience. The audience is all metahumans. And so they're all shifting in their seat and they're scratching and they're breathing and all this. They're all moving, they're all alive. And then the camera moves up. And so, a lot of times we would have middle ground elements that were like, we'd do a reverse angle of the audience sitting in the pews, right? The congregation. So we'd have people that were real 2D cards, right? They're video. And then they're in the pews. We just put them in the pews, again, flush with the camera. And then the people who are in the foreground and in the background, they're all metahumans. So they're surrounded by 3D animated characters, but they're with a shallow depth of field, they're out of focus, so you can't really tell. Yeah. And so that gave us like way more production value and like 50 more extras or 70 extras that we didn't have while we were shooting. So it gave a bigger scope to it. So all the scenes that took place in the church were done this way. And then we did the similar thing where at the very end of the movie, the exterior of the church too. So I wanted to have a church that was deep, remote forest. So just a church, little path that leads up to it, and then nothing around for miles and miles and miles. So that doesn't exist in real life. I could not find that in real life. So we were able to find a church online for about $80. And then we revamped it and rejiggered it. And we put it in one of the Maui forests. So we adjusted the forest the way we wanted to, and then we were able to do again like real life people, 2D cards, physically placing them in the environment. There's a scene at the end of the film where the church catches on fire, and then our heroes are running through the forest being chased by this satanic cult, and so many of them, I wanted them to be naked or in robes. And so shooting in a forest with like 50 naked people, very difficult to do. Yeah. And so wasn't able to do that. So I was able to shoot them running in a green screen. And then what we did was we were able to, in some cases, move the 2D cards. We'd animate the 2D cards and we'd have a camera tracking with it like this. And then we have foreground elements that were 3D environment and background elements that were 3D environment. And they were all reacting, the way that they would normally, like silhouetting with background. And it was incredibly easy, actually, compared to doing this type of thing in Nuke or After Effects, to have just a real-time comp in Engine. It was really... the ability to just play around and figure out my shots and change lenses and camera moves and move people around and recomposite shots and try to experiment. The amount of iteration I was able to do is like many more times than the other style of visual effects.
Yeah.
So it gave me a lot of freedom, gave me a lot more shots to be able to do with really just two artists working in Unreal, all like on a Zoom call like we are now.
Yeah.
And so I was able to do the majority of the work in text, at home, in my home, and then they're all across the country, Los Angeles and Detroit, and we're just sort of coming together and working online. So it was really a great way of working. And I think that the shots turned out great. I'm really pleased with how they worked.
Yeah, no, I think it turned out really well, and I think it was a really good use of Unreal Engine, yeah, with like the green screen compositing, and then you had like that wide shot that was like a full CG. So yeah, I think it turned out really well.
Yeah, it depends on what shot you want, what the shot requires. But when it was really far away, like I had the 50 people running in the forest, and I was able to use Mixamo mocap that was just, free, again, free. And we were able to get these characters to run through the forest, and didn't cost anything. And I think it looks real. And, for me to, since I come from, physical production, I know how expensive it is to shoot a forest at nighttime for real, not day for night. Like you'd have to rent these big balloons, or you rent one of those big moonlights, and it's like $10,000 for the night.
Oh, wow.
And you got to get a generator and permits, and we're talking about $100,000 night that you probably have to do 3 nights to do all the stuff that we needed to do, and that's $300,000. And then we were able to just do it with 3 people, in a couple of weeks, and just unheard of. So what I'm excited about is I'm excited for other filmmakers around the world who don't have a lot of money, but who know how to be creative with this technology and with these techniques, and being able to, in a dorm room, be able to make something that looks like a Star Wars movie or Lawrence of Arabia. And if you have a really cool story to tell, but you don't have a lot of money, you can still tell that story. Like independent filmmaking, up until very recently, if you wanted to tell a story with a movie and you didn't have that much money, well, then it would kind of look like Clerks or something, you'd just be able to shoot in the places that you could shoot. Like the guys who made Clerks, like one guy worked at a video store, the other guy worked at a convenience store. So the whole movie takes place in a video store and a convenience store because that's what they had. And so, it's like, that's the movie that they could tell. And I love Clerks. It's a cute little movie, but like, if you were, had $20,000 and you want to make a movie, you're as an artist, you're really compelled that you want to make a movie that takes place in Siberia in the 1920s. And that's the story you're burning to tell. You should be able to tell that. You want to tell a samurai war epic, that it takes place in the Meiji period, but you don't have that much money. But you have a story to tell. You're burning to tell this story, and now you can. And that to me is so exciting, because filmmaking up to this point, if you wanted to tell a gigantic samurai epic movie, you'd have to be a multimillionaire, or you'd have to have a huge corporation to get behind you. And then once you have a big corporation or millionaires behind you, or then they dictate the story you want to tell, that they all of a sudden they're paying for the story, so they're going to tell you to change it. So as an author, as a storyteller, you're going to be compromised. And so the only people who are not compromised, who want to tell a story that's on that kind of scale, are like millionaires. So you have to be a millionaire or a billionaire in order to be an artist.
Yeah.
And so what if you're not a millionaire? What if you're a working class person or a poor person? Well, you'll never tell your story. And there's more poor people on the planet than there are rich people. I mean, rich people are a very small percentage of the general population. So how many wonderful stories and movies are we missing out on because working class people aren't able to tell those stories or make those movies? Well, now they can. So I think that, in 100, 200 years or 500 years from now, when people look back on this art form called movies, they're going to look at this moment in time as the renaissance of filmmaking. There was a renaissance in painting that happened a few hundred years ago. And that was because the middle class in the Middle Ages, in Europe, the middle class started to have, there was like the first middle class of Europe. And that meant that there were people who had free time for the first time. There was a middle class, and that middle class, those people, those families, young men and women started to paint. And before that, there was very few people who could paint, and paint at the same time, pigments became cheaper. So people who were there were more artists than ever before because of this middle class, and then the pigments became cheaper. And so all of a sudden, that's the Renaissance. That's when we get the best artwork that had been recorded in history up to that point. And so there were more artists, and it was more affordable to make art. And then, of course, now we have the wonderful, beautiful Renaissance art that has contributed to our society ever since. And so we're living through that right now. Like the artists that are going to come up during this time period are going to be the artists that people talk about throughout the ages. For film.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting period, and yeah, for me, that's one of the reasons why I got into Unreal, because I had these ideas but just didn't have the budget. So I was like, you know what, with Unreal, you can always be working on your idea, whether it's like previs or I think that you can always be able to get your ideas down. So that to me is very exciting, and just I'm looking forward to seeing more people utilize Unreal Engine for their storytelling.
Well, I'd like to see some of your work. So would you send me some of your films that you've been working on? I want to see the samurai one, I don't know if it's a samurai one, but it's like you've got like an ancient Japanese story that you worked on.
Yeah. I can send you a link to the one. It was like the Japanese, like the Taiga drama. So it's like one of the famous. I'm sure your dad knows the Taiga drama series.
Okay, well, there's a ton of those like ancient Japanese like period costume dramas that are on television, like the soap operas. I love those. Yeah. I would love to. My family is a samurai family, and we have a whole story of our samurai ancestors. And I would love to tell one of our stories, make a samurai movie at one point, and I would love to use the virtual production technique.
Yeah,
that's my goal. Come back to Japan for maybe a year or two and work on a samurai movie and utilize virtual production. Maybe we'll work on something together.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. So, so anyways, Peter, thank you so much. I'm not going to take any more of your time for today. So thank you for sharing your stories and kind of like your workflow and your process and how you've kind of been a part of like Unreal Engine and filmmaking. And looking forward to seeing more of your stuff in the future.
Thanks, Steve. Likewise. Thanks for inviting me.
Not a problem. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.